What is up, everybody? Thank you all for attending the June AMA. We have a zillion questions today, so we are going to dive right in. Feel free to stop me if you have any questions. Otherwise, we're going to just go through the long list, and I'll leave some time at the end to also address just random questions that come up throughout. So one of the first questions was, and I think this is a really important one. Uh, I've been having a lot of trouble getting good sleep, and I was wondering if you have any recommendations. When the market is really active, especially when there's a super hot name and player, a big catalyst the following day, I have a hard time getting a good night's sleep because my mind is racing about whatever is going on in the market. Usually I can fall asleep quick, but then I wake up after a few hours and find it nearly possible to get back asleep because I can't slow my mind down. I do all these good things, eat clean, cold plunge, sauna, blah, 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 supplements, but they don't do the trick. And have you ever struggled with this? So yeah, this actually is one of my favorite subjects to talk about because, as you all know, I love just health, wellness, and these subjects. And I do actually work with some of the best pros in the world on topics like sleep. So I do think while I'm not an expert, I do work with experts and I know what they're going to say on some of this stuff. So I absolutely do struggle with this stuff, 100%. I'd actually argue that some of this is probably one of my biggest weaknesses in my sleep. And that mental stimulation before bed is the real cause of it. And when you work with these experts, what they say is some of the most important thing is really, really having a solidified pre-bedtime routine and a wake-up routine. And so this question is specifically about the really active days. And training or preparing for the really active days are always going to be hard. And I would say you need to build these habits when it's not active. So like if it's just a normal Monday tomorrow and there's not much going on, you don't want to just fool around with your sleep routine and then think on the big days you're magically going to be able to go to bed. So what that means is on these normal days, like if this week is super slow, Monday through Thursday or Sunday through Thursday, all the nights before the markets open, really, I'd argue actually 7 days a week, you want to have a very specific routine. What does that look like? So ideally, you have the same bedtime each night. I really try to go to bed at 11 p.m. each night. And so with my sleep coach right now, we've been trying to push my time in bed time to 8.5 hours to try and push my sleep an extra half hour or so. And so if I want to be asleep at 11 p.m., I'm actually that doesn't start at 10:59. What that really means is it starts with having an early dinner. So in an ideal world, I'm eating at even 5 p.m. The earlier, the better, and not that heavy or, crazy spicy foods or alcohol. I'm also trying to wind down all my drinking so I don't need to piss during the night. And so it starts even with dinner and ending my water consumption. But then I would say probably about 3 hours before bed, maybe even the more the better too, but at least 2 to 3. That's where I start to protect that time and I'm in total wind down mode. It's so hard for me with all the different businesses and things I'm involved in to get off my phone and get off my email and get off texting. And I really try so hard to do that. And so at 8 p.m., my phone, I pretty much like program this kind of like sleep mode where I have no notifications. I have no, it kind of makes it a pain in the ass to use most apps. And I'm done checking email. I use this app called Freedom, and Freedom allows you to block certain apps. So I can't use social media. I can't check email. I can't check Twitter. And that's really important because so many times I used to check email and I still do. I'm not perfect. I still mess up. But if I check an email or the markets at 10 p.m. and it's like, oh my God, this stock is already up, Nvidia's up another 7 points, then that starts to create mental stimulation and the anticipation, what is tomorrow going to be like? And so the more I remove those cues, that protects me from falling into like some dumb Twitter fight with a troll or checking the Reddit rabbit hole and spending 3 hours on Ask Reddit or something. And so I really try and remove anything that's going to mentally stimulate me. Like light TV is totally fine. A lot of times I'm just reading a book. That's really my time where I'll either like sauna or I'll read a book and I really wind down. If you want to do some breathing exercises, so pretty much like, I shower, I get ready for bed, 10:30 p.m. I'm doing some light breathing. I'm doing some really light reading. I'm usually just reading just like some fiction book or something dumb. And that's really easing me into my 11 p.m. bedtime. And so, especially on these big days, I know it's so common to wake up extra early and everything else. There are days where, let's just face it, like you might need to wake up early. There's no way around that, in which I'll try and go to bed a little bit early. But what I really try to do, like the reason why you're waking up throughout the night is essentially because of it's an anticipatory response. The same way, if you've ever had a flight at like 6 a.m. and you're like, oh my God, I need to wake up 4:30 a.m. to catch this flight and head to the airport. You set your alarm for 4:30 a.m. But trust me, if you're anything like most people, you're waking up 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., and then you end up not being able to fall back asleep and you don't need the alarm anyways. And the markets is doing that same thing. Essentially, you're creating that anticipatory response and that mental stimulation. And the best way to protect that is when I wake up, it's so incredibly hard. I really try not, especially when it's slow. Like you need to build this habit when it's slow. I do not check the market. I at least give like 1 hour to do my proper routine, have some mindfulness, and then I check. Again, there's times when it's just a reality of this job. You're going to need to break that, and you're going to need to make sure something stupid isn't happening at 5 a.m. But I know if I check where is GameStop or Nvidia trading at 5 a.m., the odds of me being able to be like, oh, teehee, Nvidia's up 7 points, or like Nvidia's at 141, whatever it was at pre-market on Friday, or whatever the day was, I have zero chance of being able to go back to bed, because again, you have a cortisol response, like you have a stress response, and your mind's stimulated. So that's totally normal. And that's a very long-winded way of saying, like, the more you build these habits in the easy times and the more you stick to them in the hard times, you're not going to be perfect. Like, I think it's just, like I'll be damned if an Olympic athlete is able to sleep well before their Olympic trial or whatever. Like, it's just the reality. But that means if your sleep is normally this shitty, we at least want to bring it up to here by having your habits be perfect during the slow times. Does that make sense for everyone? And I would say, look, like, you do everything right outside of that, with like the clean eating, the sauna, working out. But the reality is, like, we're so habit forming, especially for stimulation and stress, right? Like, oh, guess what? You worked out and you saunaed, but essentially in our mind, it's like, oh my God, I need to be aware of there's a tiger around my camp. I hear that, like in your mind, you have that stimulation. Like, you're not supposed to be able to fall asleep when your mind is super stimulated and worried about what tomorrow is going to bring. Does that kind of make sense for that? Anything I can touch on or address? But I do think everyone struggles with that. And I think we all can relate to that question. Going once, going twice. Okay, good. So one of the questions from Robert, and this was important, and which is why I wanted to wait to address this. Essentially, the question was having expectations and the pressure we put on ourselves. Like in an ideal world, we want to be green every day. We want to make a certain amount. As Robert pointed out, that isn't reality. So what should a developing trader expect to do on a regular day or on a good day? And how often should we green and all that other stuff? And so this has come up with another trader that I work with. And I think really it's a bigger question than that. It's as humans, we put all these external pressures on ourselves. Some of them might be psychological, some of them might be real. There are people out there that need to make X amount to cover their rent. There are people out there that need to make X amount to cover the costs of their family and to keep food on the table and everything else. So these pressures are definitely 100% real. And so, I mean, you don't want to minimize the psychological ones, right? Like it can be totally irrational. You might be very well off and have your food and needs covered, but we still put pressure comparing ourselves to others. We compare ourselves to our own internal expectations, and like, we are human. There is no getting rid of that. What I would say is we want to try and minimize that, though. I don't really view that, like, and I think most of the data confirms this, you can't really perform your best is like the more external pressure on you, the worse you're going to perform. When we're in a true peak flow state and doing our best, we're free from those external pressures and we're just doing what we're training and working to do. And so first of all, some of those pressures are real, like the monetary ones. And that's why like the general piece of advice is you really want to live so under your means. Like as a trader, this job is really, really hard and really predictable. Even myself, most years I was probably in a hole for like, one huge trade would go wrong and I would be negative on the month or like negative for a couple months a year. And then there's slower years. Like 22 was a pretty damn slow year. I think most people were at least making a 50% pay cut on that year versus other years. And to get around that, you want to do everything that you can control to reduce those, living within your means, saving up some acorns, giving yourself the longevity and the runway. So that's for the real pressures that we do need to perform. Then for the mental ones, it's so important to like, because even in your question, Robert, you said like we expect ourselves to be green every single day, blah, 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 blah. And I would say I would question that premise. Like I don't know, like, should we have that expectation at all? Is that even rational? There is no trader really that's going to be green every single day, not really in the game and the style of trading that we're doing. And I think you want to reframe those and say, like, look, it's not my expectation to be green every day. It's not my expectation to make money every day or every month. My expectation and the part that I can control is I just want to get a little bit better today. And that's where my bobblehead concept comes in, because it's like, look, I want you to divorce your focus from these external pressures. I don't want you to compare your performance to someone else. I don't want you to compare, oh man, I'm supposed to be green 90% of days or 80% of days per month. I really want you to say, am I just better than the day prior? Am I a better trader than the prior day? And so like, what should a developing trader expect to do on a regular day or on a good day? Like, it really depends the market and everything else. Like, and what might be a good market for someone else could be a bad market for you. So I would say like, you shouldn't really have any expectation of green days or P&L or anything else. You want to see over time the trajectory improving, right? So if you're on average green X amount, you do want to see it improve. You do want to see results. But the more important part is to like free yourself of any expectations and put yourself in a position to just focus on the process. Am I improving? Like, what do I want to improve on? And can I measure those things? Okay, maybe something that I want to improve on or something that helps my trading is doing a daily report card or a trade write-up or studying tape. Can I count and quantify my ability to do that? Have I studied tape 20 out of 20 trading days this month? Have I done my daily report card 20 out of 20 trading days? So I would say generally you want your expectations to be on the process. It's not easy. It takes a lot of time to do that, but like it's still a skill and it's still wiring in your brain that happens over time. And so many people might know that my number one goal every year, it wasn't a P&L goal because I can't control whether if my goal is 5 million, guess what? If I made 5 million in 2020, I hugely underperformed what I should have done. If I made 5 million in 2022, then I outperformed, right? At least I think so. But so it's like, what does that mean? If I made 5 million and I'm like, oh, I achieved my goal. Well, no, Lance, like you should have made 20 million that year, right? And so that's why my number one goal was I just wanted to improve. I think it was 200 days a year. And I think there's 250 like trading days roughly. So I left time for vacation. I left time for sickness. I left time for just like, burnout. So 200 days per year, I wanted to make sure in some tangible way, am I better than the day before? And that was the only thing I expected of myself. I didn't expect P&L. Does that make sense to everyone? Does that cover it? We got a thumbs up. And anyone else that want to touch on that, or are we good? Okay, cool. So then we had a question, how much weight do I put into the different variables, like perhaps the daily chart? Then how do you grade those setups accordingly? So the fun part about trading is there is no one answer to this, but I would say there are general guides. So if I had to guess, if I had to give a general guide, as an intraday trader, right? That's different than if I'm a swing trader or a daily trader. As an intraday trader, I would say I put 60% of the weight on the intraday chart. I put probably 30% on the daily, and then probably 10% on the long-term chart, like, you know, like a multi-year or whatever. And I know that's 100%, but I'll add another like 5% for like the level 2. That being said, there's some trades that are way different, for example, like I did those top ops for May, and one of the trades was Sam, which had a Boston Beer, an M&A headline. And so when this has an M&A headline, I actually don't really care that much about the daily chart. Like I really care about, you know, the headline, which I didn't even mention as a variable in general, right? Because it's a different type of trade. But then the other thing is in this specific trade, on the way up, there is a very, very clear bats buyer. So in this specific situation, the box was actually very, very important to me. The headline was important to me, and the daily chart was meaningless to me pretty much. And not totally, but like that's an example where these weights can way shift according to the thing. In stuff like the S&P 500 and futures, or if I'm doing something much bigger time frame, like for example, as I'll get into with these semis, like I've got a short swing in Avigo right now, AVGO. Because I'm doing big picture daily, like the box is like literally meaningless to me because I'm trying to hold this for like days and just listen to the chart. So it really is dynamic based on the specific trade and what's going on. And a lot of that is just going to come over time and experience and learning like, oh man, like what were the variables that factored into this? So then that of course influences the grading. And the grading, of course, is super complicated, right? So if we take that example that I gave with Boston Beer, I need to weight the factor of the headline quite a bit. I then need to weight the intraday quite a bit. I need to weight the box. And like before you can grade accurately, you need to know how to weight the variables accurately, right? Because if you don't have a good, if you're not doing the right, like if on this AVGO swing short, I'm like, oh my God, the box is 100% important, and I give it an A plus or whatever. It's like, oh wait, if that's wrong, then it doesn't matter anyways. I'm just going to be fooled. So the grading also tends to come over time and experience and kind of refining over time. If you think a setup is really good, but then your data starts to show, oh my God, I'm only winning 3 out of 10 times and the risk reward isn't that great, the EV on this isn't so great, then guess what? We need to change our lens a little bit. So a lot of the grading comes from like understanding the different weightings for that setup, and it's always going to be subjective. Like at no point am I ever crunching a calculator. So for example, you know, the other question was calculating EV. Can I give an example? And like even with EV, with some of these calculations, like pull something up now. So let's pull up like this Avigo. So oftentimes the easiest variable in the expected value equation is the risk. So let's say I shorted the break of prior bar lows. This low was 1785. So let's say I shorted 1785 here. I know exactly what my risk is. My risk is I was going to give it to 1850. So that was 65 points of risk. That is super defined. So often our risk is the easiest variable. Now I need to know what the reward is. So I actually don't like really know. I can kind of estimate like, okay, here's the range that we came from. This equilibrium range here, I would say in general, the equilibrium range was 1300 and we broke out from about 1450 or so. So like one target I might assume is maybe this whole move was kind of just overdone bullshit and we go back to this range. Maybe I use this moving average. I tend to like, especially in this type of setup, I kind of think the moving average is kind of appropriate. But now here's the thing is part of this move was on news. And that's another thing that makes me like, if these were pros, the big con is that this move was on news, it's earnings, I believe. So that makes me a little bit less excited. It's a con. And so if I'm trying to gauge the reward, it's like, man, like 1500 is a good base case. Like, I think that's maybe a little bit aggressive for this. I think even if we get anywhere in 15 to 1600, that's a pretty damn good trade. So in general, I want to handicap these things pretty conservative. Like, I've spoken before about a 20% kind of buffer I give myself. So rather than using the moving average at 1500, I'm just going to even give it 1600, right? So my risk was 65 points. My reward is essentially 180-ish down to that 1600. And so what's the probability that I think this is going to occur? That's also really hard. That probability of success is tough. And of course, I'm simplifying, right? Because there's an infinite amount of outcomes that could occur. In fact, my risk starts at $65, but each day that trailing stop is going to change it. So the dynamic nature of this chart is each day my expected value is changing. But in this moment, when this cracks, I think the odds of this going down versus stopping me out is probably, man, given this move and the amount of legs, which I'll get into for other reasons, I think it's pretty damn good. Like, I liked this trade a fair amount. Maybe it's like 80%. And so that, of course, is a huge guesstimate. And the reward was a huge guesstimate. And we just talked about the quality of your output is only as good as your inputs. So guess what? If you ask me the expected value of this trade, I can't speak confidently. All I can give you is my guesstimate. No one is going to you will never get two traders that agree on the expected value of what this trade is. No one's like, if you ask Lucas what he thinks and you ask me, we're not just going to spit out like, oh, we both agree it's 72.4. That's never, ever going to happen. Right. And so, like, that's how I view these things. Like, that's the calculation that's going on in my head. And honestly, like, I'm just rounding, right? Like I'm not using exact numbers. In no way am I using Excel anywhere, right? Like, there's no calculation. It's just mental ballparking, right? I think my reward is roughly 2x the risk. I think the probability of this working is at least 50-50, probably much higher. So therefore, I think it's good. And a lot of this your eye just does. Like, when I look at this chart, I can just tell that this distance to these highs is quite small, and this distance to down here is quite big. So eventually your eye does a lot of the processing as well. And I know, like, okay, I like this quite a bit because I also think NVIDIA, the leader, is going to be topping. And so that's how I'm running a calculation. And so I'm then, of course, running that calculation in real time at every single moment, right? Like, when this falls all the way down to like here, keep in mind this next day, my trailing stop needs to go all the way up here. So as this started to come in, like at 1650, the risk reward when my stop is up at 1800 is so much different than when I first shorted here. So I am taking some covers into this as the expected value gets, in my opinion, not as good. But I will hold some to the true stop of just break of prior bar highs, most likely. So now let's take something like Micron. This was the same deal where I shorted. I shorted this day. I held a chunk during the day, but then I covered. Like, this already was a pretty damn move. Then pretty good move. So then think about it. This day on Friday, we gapped down all the way down to here. My stop is all the way up there technically, right? That's a huge distance. And we pulled back to this moving average and we retraced this whole breakout, right? So for me at like 136, that's like a no-brainer cover and potentially even a long. I didn't take the long just because I think it's like probably good, but more on the marginal side when you're kind of short the rest of the sector. But that's how I'm thinking of this stuff. And there's no precise calculations. It's just your best quick guesstimate. Yeah, let me stop there. How does that answer work for anyone? Any questions on that? Did all that sound good? Good. A lot of nods. Okay, cool.
Lance. So
Hit me.
kind of to this point of weighting variables, for your intraday trading, how much do you like weigh the pre-market action on these like really in place stocks? Like on Tuesday, my pod and I, we were watching MBIO, and it sort of made this like range in the pre-market, and then it kind of, yes, if we could pull up the chart.
what was that? The 17th or something? What, let me, Friday, Thursday,
18th,
Wednesday, Tuesday.
the
Are
18th.
you sure? Because Friday, oh, because we had the day off, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, so 18th. I always joke that I need like a Vanna White or something to pull up these damn charts. Oops, the old 3-minute chart. All right.
Yeah, so we were kind of looking at this for a short, but the only thing was that it kind of capitulated off the open, but a couple of us were iffy on it just because it was still within that pre-market range. So we kind of viewed it as sort of no man's land. So I was just wondering like what your thoughts on that is.
I mean, but isn't that a good thing that it stayed within that pre-market range? Because couldn't you argue that like, oh, like, right? And so in the most basic of technical analysis, what we want to do is, let me actually see. I'm so shitty at this stupid, bear with me here, guys. I'm extremely shitty at this app. There we go. So in the basics of technical analysis, this was, this was the highs. We can kind of just assume it might be resistance. This eventually became support. So in basic technical terms, we want to buy close to support. We want to sell close to resistance, and we want to buy the break above resistance or short the break below support, right? Do we all kind of agree with that in basic technical analysis? So this was the move, right? And this was kind of a big move pre-market for sure. So I would say this, we haven't really formed this bottom range yet, but we eventually do. So when we move close to up here, I would argue like no man's land. So with no man's land, it's more so I don't want to buy here, right? Because I don't want to buy within this range. I don't want to bet on continuation when we're within this range. So, but I don't mind if this eventually becomes the range, like 90 cents to whatever. I don't mind potentially buying small size in theory. Like I'm just talking pure theoretical, like forget this MBio, but in theory, I don't mind buying close to support or shorting close to resistance. Like if I'm going to be buying, I absolutely do not want to buy, like no man's land is more like I absolutely don't want to buy at 130. I want to buy at 134 or whatever. And most of all, like the true middle of this range is like a buck 10. So I'll neither be shorting or longing in this middle here. I'm generally waiting for like I'm most aggressive outside this range, short here or long above there. Again, in general terms, I'm not saying I would actually short here, just in general. But so this, I don't mind this as a short because it's towards the top of this, and we did already have that capitulation. So this actually sets up to be the potential lower high. Like like I always use these. I just have some just canned examples that are just stuck in my head. Like this Goff, how we spoke about that being the higher low. So this was kind of the big range, but now we're buying here because it's close to that support after a capitulation. The other one we always talked about is this shot. So this becomes the range, huge capitulation, but this we're shorting as it's close to that range, but I definitely don't want to buy here. I don't want to buy anywhere in here unless it's above that range or close to the bottom of the range, which is way back here. Does that kind of help clarify that? Like that's an important question that I don't think I've clarified well enough before.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, so that was good. Anything else on any of that before I keep jumping?
Yeah, I had a question. I thought Neil's question was pretty good regarding the pre-market action. I know you were involved, I mean, like GME, AMC, you were pretty active in pre-market. How much risk allocation do you usually like use pre-market, or do you even think about it, or you're just gonna play a setup, just like you would in regular trading hours?
Oh, so one thing, and that's where I thought Neil's question was going, and it didn't go there, but and this question just reminded me of what I did want to say. Like, how much weight do I give to pre-market action? Like, I'm definitely giving some weight to it. But ultimately, I will be aware of it, but I'm also only aware of it like if there's like meaningful volume going off. Obviously, once the stock opens, we're going to do way more volume. But if something's doing like 1 million shares per bar during the day and pre-market it does 2,000 shares, like I give zero weight to that. Like if something's doing pretty much no volume pre-market, I give absolutely zero weight. But where I do give weight is, and I thought this was super interesting, is on this top day on 6-20, Nvidia's gapping up like 4% or something. And this arm started, let me see if I can pull this day up. What day was this? Oops. Shit. Here we go. Oh God. We're stuck in the infinite loop again. Oh God. I'm sorry, guys. We're screwed. I don't know how I get back to a normal cursor, which is how I embarrassed myself last one. Is this it? Pointer. Pan. Pointer. Let's do that. So this 6-20. What video is that? Was that the I think that was like, was that the GME review or something where I got stuck with like the chart adjustments for like 50 times in like a 2-hour span? Yeah,
Yes,
that
sir.
was,
It's really funny to see the watch.
yeah, funny for everyone but me for 2 hours. Okay, yeah. So this arm started way high pre-market and then it started to fade off into the open and into the prior day's range. And even if we look at this MU, this MU was pretty much starting within the prior day range. And then I think it was also AVGO, it was the same deal where like it was up kind of with NVIDIA early, but then it started to fade off. And like that was super interesting to me, right? Like, let me go back to these daily charts. So this NVIDIA is the leader, right? You have the leader up 4%. You have the leader up 4%. Micron wasn't able to gap at all. ARM was gapping but faded back into this range. AVGO, which looked pretty dead the prior day, is not able to gap up and is opening down there. So that was super interesting to me, right? Like I think we all agree NVIDIA is the leader. So that price action actually made me super interested in these other ones, more so than NVIDIA. NVIDIA did end up being like kind of a pain in the ass off the open where it wasn't going down. That doesn't really surprise me. Like that, I think that pre-market action speaks where it's like, that was the tell, I think, for this Avigo. Well, now it's Broadcom, but AVGO, Micron, ARM, like that pre-market price action fading off when your leader is like up 4% and it's the biggest market cap of them all by a mile. That was definitely a really big tell to me. So one thing, Drew asked, do you wait for a break or retest of those levels? Drew, would you mind clarifying that? I don't know the timing of when you sent that versus when I was speaking.
Yeah.
Which
You
levels?
just you mentioned that we're talking about no man's land when you get either above or below those levels. Do you wait for a break of the level, then it comes back and retests that before you go long or short?
So who wants to throw out an answer? Do I wait for a retest of the levels?
Ever. You
It's-
don't wait for confirmation.
Yep. So in general, the best setups when that level is broken, they're just gone. So if we were to take, actually, I'm on AVGO. So this AVGO, like this was kind of like the highs. When the best stocks, when they're broken, they're gone. Like I understand that had earnings, but even if we go back to SMCI, these were the highs. It breaks it, it's gone. Or you want to know a really good one recently? This Apple, and I should even potentially use a weekly chart. This Apple at the $200 level, this was such an interesting play. Right? This had the AI news. Then the next day, this retraces that and just absolutely explodes above 200. That's really interesting. And notice, there is no retest. Like if I wait for the retest, well, guess what? Now the stock is dead and dog shit. This thing went 10% above 200 in a straight line. So the absolute best setups will just be gone. And, I want to make sure I add this to my list. That Apple I do want to discuss because that's in when I do the top ops, because that's an interesting one. So it's not that I won't play a retest, but like if this now comes back down, I'm probably not going to play it. Like this already made its move and now it's just kind of dying. There are times where I might be interested, like, so take NVIDIA. And this is going to be, I need on the 21st, but let's just do this. So this NVIDIA, this broke, call it, I don't know, 138.50. We cracked super hard. That's a big crack. And so now we get back up here. So like a lot of people think, oh my God, this stock probably isn't going. Like this is an interesting area where you can short against those highs. I'm not that confident. Like in general, I prefer to short on this break or that break. But like this is the type of thing that now we're back up here. I don't mind shorting in here if I really like the daily. I'm only doing this because the daily is so interesting on this stock. And the other stocks are kind of failing. So there are times where like I will potentially do a retest, but in general, my sizing will be so much more aggressive on stuff that it's just the best setups, they're gone. There is no chance for that. Okay, cool. Got it there. Anything there before I go on? Oops. Before I go on to the next question.
Hey, Lance.
Yeah, hit me, Matt.
So I was pretty aggressively short into that 10 to 1020 roll. I'm just wondering, how you go through the process of where you would have to cover that. And then I guess personally, I had trouble getting back in, especially getting back in so aggressively because I really thought that first roll was going to work. So question would be, where would you cover if you were short into that 1020 bottom? And, how would you think about getting back in addition to what you said, the 139 wide?
Yeah, I mean, that's a
size?
really good question. That's a really good question. And it's going to be a complicated answer. So I would say I have a few solutions to that. So like, I don't think there's anything wrong with buying that turn, or sorry, covering that turn. Like I think shorting there and making this leg and covering that turn is really good. Like that's great. And I don't think there's anything wrong with, shorting here. I wouldn't love covering here because we're so close to 136, but I think shorting here and like catching this leg is also amazing. So like in general, most of my trading, I do just try to catch the specific leg, like especially Trillium style. Like I was just catching legs and not really doing much big picture. And then look, if it sets up again for a re-entry, great. I would argue this did set up for a re-entry. I think it's totally fine to re-short there. If this didn't set up for some good re-entry, I need to also just be okay not like it way lowers your variance as a trader. If you like, I can catch these legs all day. Then if it doesn't set up, I'm okay missing it. And your variance as a trader will go way down because you're just sniping those little specific legs. The bigger your time frame, the more your variance goes up, but the more you'll catch the bulk of the move and the more scalable it is. And so my alternative solution is like, a lot of times in stuff like this, I'm trying to work around a potential core position. And so when that happens, I might be like, I might have in my head. And so this is what I do pre-market, which is super useful. I might be thinking to myself, like, what core amount of size or shares do I want to hold in this thing? So for me, I wanted 10K NVIDIA. Like my general rule has been like, and we'll get more into these semis, but like I think these semis are potentially just totally toast because this is the third leg. And so actually yesterday for like the Clover group, they had an opening and they needed someone to cover. So I helped them do with like a quick virtual presentation where I spent pretty much like 45 minutes discussing the daily charts of the semis, which I'll be able to get a recording and share with everyone. But my big picture thought, for reasons that are in that video, and I won't rehash for 45 minutes, where I do think this could have been the final leg, big picture. And so for me, pre-market, I decided what's an acceptable amount of size that will be my minimum. Like if this turns, like I at least want this on. And so for me, it was 10K. And so I was shorting around that position. I was potentially using some options here and there. But I never wanted to, I never wanted to generally not kind of get that exposure back on. So there's times where I might even flip long. Like, man, where was it also in NVIDIA? There was Oh man, there was, or maybe it was ARM. I was trading ARM one day. Maybe it was this same day. I'll find it in a second. But there was times where I wanted to be short ARM, but if it capitulated, I was happy to flip long or cover, knowing I'd work back into that position. And so for me, like I was potentially adding or using options on stuff like this and scaling out and scalping some of that. But then no matter what, I was holding on to my 10K. And so even like, so for me, part of it was like just choosing a big picture size that I'm going to hold to prior bar highs. I don't want to say no matter what, like if this like melts to like, I don't know, 115, 110, 105, I'm probably definitely at 105, I'm probably way reduced. But I pretty much, I committed big picture to a certain size that I view as a separate trade. So like, I don't have two separate accounts, but essentially it's like daily swing trade Lance is doing one trade, and then intraday Lance is scalping around it based on the intraday. And so especially in stuff like this AVGO where it was kind of just the daily backside, I don't have like massive size in this one. But it was just like I am just going to try to hold that to this stop. And this, this one's higher priced and somewhat illiquid, so I wasn't trading around. But then if we take this ARM, I think this is the one I want. Oh, so take like Micron for example. That was something that I just got out of the whole position because it just went so far back. But overall, I've been wanting to hold that swing core in some of these. I think, oh yeah, so I think it was here. Man, let me compare this real quick to NVIDIA. So this was, I want to compare this section at 130. Let's see if I'm doing this right in my head. Okay. Yeah. So and essentially these had made a couple legs down. And I think then this started to bounce. So then let's see this ARM. So this ARM really melted more than some of the other ones here. And so this was something where it's like I ended up getting flat here just because I felt like, oh my God, we went from like 180 pre-market opened 175 and now like that's a really big move. And let me even go on this daily just for reference. We went from all the way up here to all the way down there. So that's where I'm like, okay, I'm going to cover with the hope of potentially reshorting. So I'm kind of like trading. I mean, does that make sense where I'm trying to like compartmentalize and have like, I've got a big picture core I want to hold this way. And you generally want to size these way smaller than traditional intraday trading. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, so basically in your NVIDIA short on the 20th, you were holding that to highs on the day. In your core position.
Correct. Yeah.
You were trying to, okay. I understand completely.
And truth
awesome.
be told, not, people will crucify this viewpoint. The 10K that I shorted, I didn't even short it pre-market. I shorted it, like I saw this up at like 141 on like Sunday night or whatever. I was actually out to dinner with one of our colleagues that I'll let remain anonymous. And he's like, oh, it's up and I'm like, God, really? This is up another 4%. I'm like, fuck it. Like I want a core here. And so I shorted 10 and truth be told, like I wasn't going to cover that at that point. Like that was an amount of size that I personally was just okay riding because I felt we're close enough. Now that once it broke, then it's like, okay, now my stop is in. And yeah, so that's how I just view that and compartmentalize it. So one thing that Drew said, and I think is an important point to add, especially nowadays in this world. The other super cool thing I think to do, and I didn't do that well on this, doing it this way, because I was really afraid of the time decay once this kind of happened. But when this broke, and even before this broke, I was buying some of those. This was a Thursday, so I guess I was buying one DTE puts. And I think like a really cool way to almost hold that swing with asymmetry or like hold that big picture is like, I mean, I kind of know Matt aside from this stuff, like, like it's not that crazy for you to buy like a couple grand or whatever's right for you of those puts and just being like, okay, this is my kind of like big picture swing potential because it has that asymmetry. And then just being like, okay, I'm going to put X amount of premium like in a different part of my brain and compartmentalize that over here. I'm not going to touch that. Unless you want to just, if it's working in your favor, scalp some out or whatever. But then, you can trade the equity super precise and leave on like some of those options because they have really good asymmetry. Like I honestly don't do enough of that myself. I've started to do more of that this year for sure. The other thing I would say is like a lot of times I'm not super, especially in this pattern, and this will get into on the other video I'm going to share. I didn't think this was super A+. Like I would say these semis set up well, like maybe A-, like B+. I don't think this was like an A+ setup like SMCI. So I was pretty confident we were approaching a top, and a lot of times like because I wasn't like SMCI, I was confident was just going to implode and just be down a shit ton. This I wasn't so confident it was going to implode. Like it wasn't so obvious to me that this was going to be at 126 2 days later, or else you could have crushed those options. So because I wasn't so confident, I tended to actually just sell premium. Like the NVIDIA premium wasn't that great, so I didn't do a ton of it. But stuff like the AVGO premium was off of its rocker this morning. So it's I'd say options are like and Drew saying yep, same thing. He's owed calls because the IV was high. So and that's like a different ball game of risk and skill set. But like I kind of think that's a good way to think about some of this stuff too, is how can I even use options to like almost compartmentalize this?
Awesome answer. Thanks a lot.
Yep, you're welcome. Anything else on some of that? So I think I answered all these questions that you guys asked. Let me X out of this. Okay, I'm gonna X out of that. Now I really need to get to the whole zillion questions. So let's jump to some of these. Oh, and some of these were good. So Ozzy asked, do you remember any cheap and sustainable ways to live or life hacks you used to do when you were 23 living on your own in NJ? So I think like as far as we were talking about external pressures, it's so important to minimize the pressures on ourselves financially and give ourselves as long a runway as possible. As many know, like before I was even the summer before I started at Trillium, I was like throughout college, I was literally cleaning like during the summers. I mean, I was tutoring during the school year, and during the summers I was doing pool maintenance, which was miserable. It's 100 degrees and you're doing manual labor. And you're just getting roasted out there and just I've got like, I probably still have like the chlorine lung where it's like, I still choke and die. I probably have lifelong damage from it, but I was doing that to build a war chest and give me a good runway. And so along with that, life hacks. So for starters, I know when you said living on your own, you meant just being an adult, but for starters, the first answer is I had roommates. So when I was living in Princeton, I think I had like 3 or 4 roommates, which is kind of absurd, especially given it's just Princeton and not New York City. Like, especially if you're in New York City, it's just a no-brainer that you need roommates at that age. Then the other thing too was like, there's a lot of things that just aren't that expensive, but are worthwhile, like a Planet Fitness gym or like an Anytime Fitness, going outside, hiking, going to the beach, doing whatever. There's a lot of activities that aren't that expensive. And then I was really, because I had no money, it was also a good excuse to just focus on work, not ideally burn myself out, but it was just like, look, it's time for me to work hard because I don't want to be broke. And so I don't think I have any tricks other than I tried to find the healthiest food for cheap. I tried to find the cheap gym membership, and really I just like, the other benefit of being young is you don't really have that many expenses generally. Obviously, I know there's going to be single parents out there. There's going to be this, that, whatever. But in general, most young people aren't like so burdened with a lot of things. So, and your quality of life, you're okay living with things that probably, a 40 or 50-year-old isn't. So no great answer, but other than you just want to reduce your expenses as much as possible and get side income if possible. How do you advise a trainee to balance health, relationships, and trading when you're in the trenches? Yeah, so this is important, and this comes up a lot at SMB with some of the new guys. Like, balance will always be hard. You don't want to just burn yourself out. Like, if you're enjoying it and if you're having fun and if you feel good, there's going to be times when you want to push. If you feel good and if you're excited and everything else, like, don't be afraid to push. But if you start to get burnt out, like, ahead of being disgruntled, you want to start to be more proactive about that. Like, especially as time goes on, you do want to create boundaries. Like, obviously nowadays I probably don't have the best boundaries, but like for me, it was like Saturday's pretty much always been my holy day of like have fun, do whatever. Like, I would never do work on a Friday night. I would never do work generally on Saturdays. And even now, like despite me doing this, like I really like Sunday is my day to organize and catch up on work. Saturdays were always just like I will not look at a single chart. So I think it's good to have some boundaries. Again, like while we were talking on sleep at the beginning, I think it's probably healthy to say like, look, post 7 p.m. or something, I'm done with trading and I'm not going to check, or 8 p.m. whatever. So there would be times in my life where for most years I would say like, okay, I'll trade until call it 6 p.m. Eastern. Then it's like I'll hit the gym, I'll go out to dinner. And like, so I would always give even during the week some boundaries. If I did a daily report card before bed, fine. It's just finding what's right for you and just being aware of that stuff. But like without a doubt, in the beginning, if you do need to push, and it's really a balance and being in tune with what your body and your mind is telling you. And then just don't underestimate friends, right? Like you only live once. Like, I know this is a cool job and everything else, but like part of what made this fun is I was doing it with my friends. So if you can find ways to combine these things, like, okay, I'm going to go on a hike with my friends. I'm going to go out to a cheap dinner with my friends. I'm going to review with my friends. The more you can make some of these things social, the better off you're going to be. I was lucky where I got to trade with some of my best friends in the world. And it makes it just way more better. So that's my tips there. We got a question. How did you validate your strategies? Well, did that answer it? Is there anything else on that one? Because I think that's kind of an important one too.
No, yeah, that was great. Thank you.
Cool. How did I validate my strategies? How did you go back testing them? Or I misread that. What was enough to gain faith that they would work? Then how did you know when to stop using them and move on? So the nice part was having a mentor. I kind of just like monkey see, monkey do. I kind of just trusted this dude, which is a smart decision because he was one of the best. And but then obviously I developed some of my own stuff. And so a lot, like I did not do a crazy amount of back testing. Like I'll be honest, back testing is not one of my expertise. Like I think back testing in many ways is pretty damn flawed just because a lot of situations don't have comparables, or like it's just like people oversimplify these back tests. Like people generally disgustingly oversimplify back tests to the point where it's like totally useless. Like if you guys have seen some of my rants on Twitter about like how many retail traders don't use news, like if you're doing a back test and nowhere in that back test does news factor in, well, like congrats, you've got like a super shitty back test that suck. And Drew said back tests don't have nuance, and like I wouldn't say that. I would say shitty back tests don't have nuance. Like there are ways to do super, super intelligent, good comparables, and like data generally is helpful. Like I want to know with like I do want to take this chart of NVIDIA, for example, and I do want to compare it to maybe some period like this here. Like that isn't useless. And like even like with VVOS, I had a group at SMB backtest some of the variables, but in a very nuanced way. And they ended up confirming like, oh, wait, Lance, you're right. What you're doing does have edge. Here, they were able to find me pretty much like 10 similar charts that met all these nuances, and they ran the math and they're like, yeah, man, you're right. This strategy is good. Another thing I've done with another experienced trader, I think I touched on this somewhere. But we were kind of, that's not the, like we were kind of back testing, well, not we, really, he did all the work. I just kind of had an idea or whatever. Like, okay, this type of pullback where you get like a really nice leg, then you get a really kind of clean pullback holding prior bar highs, like almost a counter trend, then buying that break, like buying something like that, or even in DJT where this held prior bar highs forever and buying that break. So like you can back test some of this stuff. It's more so just people do shitty back tests. But I would say to the original question, it's more so understanding like the concepts, and I have this framework of technical analysis, and so I know what variables make something better or worse. As I'll reveal in the video that I'm eventually going to post on some of these daily charts, like I can tell you the pros and cons of NVIDIA. I can tell you the pros and cons of ARM. I can tell you the pros and cons of Avago or Broadcom, whatever. And so as far as like, so now a lot of times I would just do forward testing. Like I think people are like people do two dumb things, which is like, one, they do shitty back tests, or two, rather than doing a proper forward test, they trade actual size and lose a lot of money in tuition for no reason. And like, it's just such a dumb bias of humans. But like, I have no problem trading something on 100 shares. Or like, I mean, if 100 shares is a lot to you, let me rephrase and say I have no problem like testing something on 1 share. So a lot of times I would just forward test on like super small size, risking a couple $100, which to me was, small or whatever. And so that's one thing I would do. Then how do you know when to stop using them? Like, so I would say some stuff, the market context matters. And part of that context is being part of being a good trader is being aware of that context. Like right now, we've been in a super, super hot semi market. So now here's the thing. We've been in a super hot semi market. What if these semis absolutely just die and eat shit, and that's the end of them? If the semis die and eat shit, like, do I want to buy like AMD above 170 or something? Like, no, because this is not the right market for that. And so a lot is just having that awareness, like, and that's kind of a skill in its own right. But I would say ever since that original NVIDIA earnings, I think it was even further back than this. Whatever. Ever since that one blowout NVIDIA earnings, these semi breakouts have been amazing, and that's been working, right? I mean, Avago had that one really crazy one. My chart doesn't go back far enough right now. Let me just, yeah, this Avago breakout was super insane. And so here's my thing though, is like, if these semis absolutely eat shit, I need to recognize that like, oh wait, I don't want to be long playing breakouts anymore. Like the market changed. So it's kind of like innocent until proven guilty. So what would have happened if some of these breakouts started to go less far and less far? Like then I'd also be aware of that. What happens if the small cap runners that used to really run just stop running as far? I'm going to be aware of that and go for less of them or size it less. If you have something where it's like, oh my God, these trades are on fire. Like think when those micro cap biotechs were so strong, like the VVOS, the TPST, like how many micro cap biotechs have you seen go apeshit recently? Way less than when I was writing up like 2 a month or whatever, right? So like if some microcap biotech has something, I'm not going to be playing it like it was. So it's just being a parent of these trends and also being aware of not your back testing data, but your P&L performance data. I was always doing weekly reviews and monthly reviews. So I would be very attuned to like, oh wait, this stuff isn't working. Like sometimes you're in a hot IPO market, right? And every IPO is going. And then all of a sudden you have like, out of the last 4 IPOs, 3 were shitty. And you're like, wait a second, like, hey, I'm not going to necessarily stop, but I'm not going to be as aggressive. So it's really kind of qualitative, being attuned to that stuff. And again, stop me if anything comes up. A question regarding buying the higher low or shorting the lower high after the stock capitulates. Did you have a systemized approach for such trades? In some cases, stocks can give nice secondary turns, blah, blah, blah. Sometimes price action is more messy. I personally simply bid or short against, and that is that. What were some nuances, or were these more art than science? Did you always risk the high of day and low of day on such trades? So this is a good question, a complicated one, admittedly, but so I would say that like, yes, I would definitely pay attention to those secondary turns and the price action. And so my question that I would pose here is price action, but in some cases, price action can get much more messy after the stock capitulates. And in these cases, yada, yada, yada. When the price action gets messy, I would pose as just the thought like, do we need to play messy price action at all? Right? Does anything force us to play that rather than just wait for the best setups? So a lot of the time it's like, I'm trying to think of a good example. If the price action isn't really that good, like let's say like in this NVIDIA, I really wanted this to capitulate. And so in here, I'm not shorting all because it just isn't that good. And even here, it wasn't that amazing. So, and even this volume capitulation wasn't that great. And so this price action, like, wasn't so amazing, which is why I didn't need to be as aggressive as I otherwise could have been. And so I would say like, I wouldn't say I have a super systematic approach, but I would say the cleaner and clearer the price action. Like, again, if we go to like the thing I pick on, you know, like this GOF was kind of cool, right? Because we kind of hold lower bar highs here. And so you can either buy into this against those lows, or you can wait for that turn. And, you know, like the stuff that moves clean is generally going to bounce cleaner. If this slowly went down over 10 bars, I don't need to play that at all. So the stuff that's like messier and choppy and ranging around, I don't need to play, right? So often people are like, oh my God, you know, you're hindsighting the ones that worked. And it's like, no, it's not. I'm not hindsighting the ones that work. These ones worked because they're you know, clean to some degree. Like if this DJT didn't make this super clean move, holding so many prior bar highs, I wouldn't have played it at all. So a lot of the times I just avoid the messy situations and I just don't trade them. You know, I really like, I would argue that this NVIDIA, like it was good. It wasn't so great. You know, like this price action here was super choppy. We started to get cleaner and accelerate. Not amazing, but it was getting different. Then the second part of this, did you always risk high of day, low of day on such trades? And so I would say it really depends the trade. Like with this GOF, let's say this starts to just sit here and we spend like 5 days here and we're not going anywhere. If this isn't bouncing and going somewhere, I'm probably just getting out and giving up after a certain amount of days just because it's price acceptance. I don't need to, like, if we're just sitting here for like 5 days, I don't need to just risk all the way down there. Like the kind of edge and what I expected isn't happening. So I would say like, yeah, if a trade starts to have price acceptance, like I don't feel the need to give it the proper stop always. Like let's say this AVGO just starts to go sideways. It's like, okay, then like I'm at least probably taking some off and not giving it to prior bar highs. And then the other example with this, do I always risk high of days or low of days? No, necessarily. Even and this is to the other extreme, when things work super well in my favor, like in theory, you know, like I mentioned, this day my stop technically was 158 or something. But was that right? But because it went so far immediately, I didn't feel any need to give it all the way back there at all. And even as this went way in favor, like I don't feel the need to risk way back there. So I will be adjusting to how the chart sets up. Oopsies. Interested to know if you have any structured system for using options to minimize risk for trades that may go wrong and or increase gains, especially on the available capital buying power. Listen carefully to using calls in GME, selling calls. So yeah, is the approach secondary or should it really be paid attention to? And so again, I would say this is the oh nice, and Jorge's on the call with us. This is wonderful. So I would say this is, it really depends the trade. There's some where I view it as secondary, like like, so SMCI on that one mega day, like SMCI, the options just provided so much more skew, super asymmetric. So here, this was my primary focus for sure. I don't think on these days I was even really touching much of the stock at all. It was definitely options focus. For the reasons I mentioned on NVIDIA, when these weren't true 0 DTEs, like I wasn't so confident in this setup. The equity was more my choice. So I would say it really depends the situation. There are times, particularly when it aligns on a Friday option expiration, where it will be my primary focus. And it really depends. Like there's times like in GME, in general throughout this, like the IV was so insanely high that it's like never anywhere on this did I want to buy puts, just because like when the IV is like a zillion, your asymmetry is awful. Like if anything, I definitely wanted to sell calls on these spikes. And even to some degree, I wanted to sell puts just because they were so ridiculously expensive. So it's a long-winded answer of saying like it really depends to play, but there's definitely times when it should be primary, and that's when the situation is just so skewed. As far as good references on these points, I don't think there's anything so great out there. Like there's some good options books, but they tend to be pretty technical versus just like, I think experience just tends to be the best. I think really just watching options move and like decay over time, watching in play stocks and just seeing what the options do is probably the best teacher. And yeah, Drew made a comment in the chat and I'd agree with, like, the first question is always like, what is the trade? Like, what am I actually confident in? So like, if you take like NVIDIA, for example, I wasn't so confident we would melt like we did, especially ahead of the index rebounds and all that. Like I was kind of, the index rebounds especially made me kind of like, oh man, like, will this stuff just remain supported? It kind of made me a little bit hesitant. But I was pretty confident that like, okay, like we're approaching a top. The implied vol as far as the calls, like the calls weren't that expensive. So I didn't love that either. So it's like, there is not going to be any perfect answer just because it's like, you really need, like, if like the AVGO calls were stupid expensive. You know, like, especially on this day, they were stupid expensive. The NVIDIA calls, like, nowhere were they that expensive. And like, nowhere were the puts, though. Like, it's odd. The calls were cheap, even though it had been going up a ton. And then the puts were expensive. So it's like, you know, it's really a case by case based on that. So yeah, Jorge, let me know if that addressed it. But I don't have any good resources other than like, you just gotta watch these things and hypothesize. And like, I would also recommend just trading like micro size for stuff. Like in general, like, I know people say you shouldn't allocate risk to stuff until you have proven edge, which I think is 100% correct. But like, I do think there's something to be said for the tactile experience of trading like, you know, one share or like a couple contracts, just because that puts you actually in the trade and you're experiencing things in real time and seeing how it unfolds. And I think a lot of this option stuff just really comes from just seeing, okay, like, you know, what are the calls pricing in? What are the puts pricing in? What do I think of that and how does it pan out? Again, for you know, one contract or something. So yeah, let me know if I didn't hit that well. Okay. Could you share more on the topic of changing bias when a stock becomes super extended? For example, the third day on CCCC, Quad C, a while ago. I'm looking to join the longs. Should a trader push for intraday easy money trades align with the higher time frame at all times until that super capitulatory move, but with less size? Would you rather wait for the short op to start a new position? So let me jump back because Jorge made the point. I was looking on ways to focus more on my playbooks. And so, yeah, like what I would do, Jorge, to make this more practical is I would just start to build a playbook of like, maybe the playbook is called selling options versus longing, like a separate playbook for longing options. And then over time, you start to write up plays where it made sense. So maybe we write up NVIDIA on 2-16, or sorry, SMCI on 2-16. Maybe we write up NVIDIA on this day, or maybe we write up gold on that kind of, yeah, on this day here. Maybe we write up places to sell options. I sold in Mara on this day on 12/27. Maybe we write up, you know, what were the prices and why was it interesting to sell on some of these days. So I would just like over time build a playbook just by like really writing these up over time. And yeah, and Drew made another good point. Thank you, Drew. Like starting with spread trades where essentially there's defined risk, meaning like if you sell a call, you're also just selling one or sorry, you're buying one to protect you much higher than that, just so it's defined risk. That can also be helpful. And I think even just like if you don't have basic options knowledge, like stuff like Investopedia, there's a lot of basic options resources. Options can be quite risky. So you do not want to do anything dumb with those things. So definitely be informed, but then find like a safe way to experiment, or just, you know, micro size, or just really just start playbooking. Like the first step is just writing up some of these and being observant. Honestly, just observing is kind of the first step. Yep. So let's see. Okay. So this was a long one. So like, let me pull up the CCCC. Okay, December 23rd. So essentially in here, so this, oh no, wait. This was December 14th, 23. It wasn't fluff news, no longer. So generally, can you share more on the topic of changing bias when a stock becomes super extended? So yeah, like there's times where really I just want to always listen to the chart. Like this came up in a question with a trader at SMB, and it was one of those things where it's like in this GME, I was obviously short biased for a while, but then that tweet came out where Roaring Kitty posted his position and showed that, oh my God, he's all in huge. And so it's like essentially the analogy I gave him is like with poker. If I get pocket aces, those pocket aces might be insanely good. But if then the flop comes and the flop is 5, 6, 7 suited, all of a sudden those pocket aces might be really, really shitty. And so it's so important as a trader to really always handicap and estimate this stuff like in real time and always update that. So it's like there might be a certain piece of news that I'm bullish on. Like, okay, Roaring Kitty tweeted here at 21 pre-market or in the overnight session. At 21 in the overnight session, I'm super long biased. When we end up at 65 or like 80 pre-market on that same move, I'm very short biased. Why? Because the pendulum has just shifted so much. So I've spoken about this pendulum concept before, and I'll be doing a video for Magnum Opus eventually. But I generally try to think of things as far as like where are we as far as like euphoria and everything else. So here, when that news comes out, like, oh my God, we're just breaking out. Like this hasn't run that far. No one knew about this news. This can really run. When we're up essentially 4x in a couple days, it's way different. When I look at this NVIDIA, okay, AI hype is big. You know, I definitely want to be a buyer. Not that I was, but it's like, okay, on this huge earnings, I think this was the one. It's kind of confusing because of the split. Like I can't like eyeball this, but I'm pretty sure this was the blowout earnings that changed everything. Like, okay, that's when it's totally fine to be super bullish. But then it's like, okay, this was earnings number 1. There was another earnings in here. Then this is earnings number 3, all on AI bullishness. It's like, okay, when it's earnings number 3 and we've gone from $30 to 140, when we've almost 5x'd on like the same AI bullish hype after 3 big legs, it's like, okay, now like it's probably long in the tooth. So to your point on like CCCC, you know, it's one thing to like be like, oh, teehee, I'm bullish on this day. It's a whole other thing to be bullish later on. And I'd argue this was the same thing with FFIE. Wow, this thing's really been wrecked over time. Like this day when it's breaking out and doing insane volume, it's okay to be bullish. Once we start getting here or there, like, you know, you can make your scalps and you can play. So that was one of your other questions. Does everything need to align? I would say in the best trades and the biggest trades, everything aligns. Like if we take Nvidia, this daily chart was overextended and intraday, this broke to lows, right? So if I were to go to this short here, this 138.50 or whatever, intraday, this was a short, the daily was overextended and a short. So some of the best trades align. Not every trade does, and that's okay. You know, like there was Nvidia, oh God, I think it was this day, 3-8. I could be wrong. I think it was this day. The split makes this like, you know, super hard in my head to remember everything. In theory, I could just do the math, but it, well, I might need to go to on demand for this. Oh, there we go. Okay. I made the argument that this, oh man, this wasn't the right price. Whatever this pre-adjusted price was, like 96-ish, even though this on the daily was a short, I don't mind that much going for this long. It's just like a little scalp. But then once we break these lows here, right, that's when the intraday aligns with the daily. And that's when I'm going to be way more aggressive. So that will really affect my aggressiveness. So yeah, I don't mind doing stuff with less size, like exactly as you describe, when they don't align. And yeah, so then this was on 6-20, and I think, you know, essentially the point was 6-20 was going to be this day. Yeah, if ARM gapped up that day, you know, yeah, it's overextended on the daily to some degree, and then ideally I would want an intraday setup as well. The only downside, yeah, so the only downside with ARM, which I discussed in this other video that I'm going to post, is that this was kind of a breakout above these highs. So I felt like ARM was a little bit dangerous to be short front side until there was a turn. Like I was starting to get comfy. And this is an important point. This is actually really important. I was comfy shorting my 10K Nvidia and taking that against me, because where's the breakout? The breakout in Nvidia is all the way back here at like 97 or whatever. Like this stock has already gone 45 points. Like it's literally traveled for 3 weeks in a straight line and gone 45 points. This ARM is much more dangerous to me to short on the front side just because it's kind of just breaking. Yes, it's gone far from here, but that kind of worried me. Compared to like an Avago, Broadcom, whatever, I'll mess that up forever. Right? The breakout was kind of back here. And now again, we've gone up almost like a quarter, a third or a quarter in a couple days. So yeah, overall, I agree with the sentiments of this. Monish, after seeing Avago, AVGO, how you view exhaustion gaps, that set up post earnings. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, so yeah, I don't want to dive too much into this AVGO just because I'm going to release a very long video on it. But essentially, like, and this goes back to, I think, one of the original questions on weighting everything. One of the big cons for this AVGO was that part of this move was on earnings. That being said, like this was pretty damn extended and the volume was being good. So I definitely viewed that news being a con. And because of that news, I didn't want to short front side on this either, but I was happy to short a turn. So then like Nvidia, one of the pros is like this news happened way back here. And now we're kind of just running. Yeah, there's other upgrades and other shit, but for the most part, the big news was the earnings. The cons is this didn't have good volume capitulation. The other cons is these bars were pretty consolidating. You know, Micron didn't have earnings at all. It is earnings next week. So this was like an okay move, especially the last couple days. Like I felt most of these made like it was almost like this feedback loop where all of these were going up just because everyone else was going up, where it's like, wait a second, like, I don't know if that's how this stuff works forever. And so like this Micron, you know, is overall kind of a shitty one out of these, but then all of a sudden it's just like, boom, you know, it goes 30 points in a couple days. So, but that's kind of to my point where none of these were like so A plus to me. Like if AVGO didn't have earnings, that would have been super badass, but it did. You know, if Nvidia really got above that Bollinger Band and had volume capitulation, that would have been badass, but it didn't. So overall, yeah, I agree with your sentiment that this kind of made it a little bit tougher, but it's just something I view as a con because most of this stuff was moving as a sector. Like, I don't think AVGO would have done all that if the whole sector wasn't doing kind of that. So how to differentiate between B trades and no trades? I mean, I'll just answer this more broadly. Like, I think the best way is over time, you realize just like a lot of trades you might think are B trades that you look back and you're like, wait, I'm break even or I'm negative on these. And so that's where you realize like, oh man, like that's when I'm not back testing, but I'm looking at my P&L data. That's where you might realize like, oh wait, I'm really good at hot IPOs, but like these non-hot IPOs, I'm like pretty much near break even. And that's where it's like, okay, this is just not worth the effort I'm putting into it. So it's like, I'd say the other thing that's almost easier to think about is like in general, the best trades kind of like slap you in the face. Like the best trades are when everything aligns. Like SMCI was an absolute beauty. Some of these NVIDIA setups have been good, but again, they're not super perfect. And so it's like like that being said, like these semis, my mindset on 6-20 was like, I can't like this is such a big move. I can't not be in these and trading these. And but I never felt that anywhere else until this day. I literally did not touch a single semi, you know, all these weeks until whatever the top, literally the top, right? And even my tweets, I had one tweet and that was pre-market on the 20th. What's the game plan to short these? So I'd say like through experience, you realize what you're breaking even on and you just realize like what's not worth the effort. Then the more experience you get, the more the really good ones just slap you in the face. So once you really, really define and study the good ones, those become more apparent. And then like your P&L data and your frustration tells you which ones kind of end up being no trades. So God, I was at a concert on Friday and my voice has not recovered, so I'm slowly dying here, voice wise. In your yearly trading goals for 2019 and 20, you wrote update the trade analytics file weekly. Could you please elaborate what the trade analytics consisted of? So Trillium didn't have Trillium much through my pushing, ended up building from the ground up like some pretty hardcore trade analytics software that was internal to them. And just for data privacy concerns, like they didn't want us plugging our data externally. So what I ended up doing was I built, I don't even know if I still have it, but I built this like crazy spreadsheet or Excel spreadsheet that pretty much analyzed all my data, but it was like, one, it was super clunky and it was somewhat time consuming to do. So like essentially I was trying to replicate like TraderView. Like I think a lot of people use TraderView for data analytics, and I just was essentially custom building one in Excel, which I do not recommend. It ran like shit. It was time consuming. And I spent a lot of time on it for what eventually would just, you know, the firm just built something in-house, and I ended up, it was kind of funny. Like I spent so much time building this, you know, in Excel, you can do crazy wizard things, but it's like not really what it's designed for. But I built this like just amazing thing. And by the time I actually got it really good, like Trillium built their own in-house stuff. And I'm like, wow, this was like a massive waste of like the last 2 years of my life. But yeah, I would need to manually do that every day. But anywho, When it comes to recording screens during the day, I'm concerned that the recording files might be quite large and impact this stuff, which indeed they are quite large and do impact it. That could affect this execution speed during breaking news. So yes, this stuff can slow down your computer. My understanding is from my own testing, I found that Camtasia did not slow my stuff down. And again, like we pretty much had top of the line computers. I mean, like I wouldn't even say top of the line, like our stuff and certainly my stuff, like I bought above and beyond, you know, there's kind of like the standard issue, like firm computer. Like pretty much I made sure that my stuff was the best and paid for it. So whatever was a normal amount of RAM and everything else, like I was insanely far above that. Like it wasn't even a standard build that you could buy. And in my testing, I found no impact whatsoever, but I do acknowledge that this could exist. The other thing is I would make sure that every couple hours I was ending my recording and restarting it, because otherwise that file does become huge. And so if the first hour or two happens and nothing good happened, I'm just immediately deleting the file. If something actionable happened, I'm immediately stopping and saving the file. So I wouldn't let these run too big. Yes, it's kind of a pain in the ass, but like, you know, pretty much anytime I took my DRC break, I would just stop my recording and either delete or re-record it. And yes, I had just an insane computer, but most people I don't think had issues. Drew here is saying recording 2 screens with OBS daily, no problems. Mid-tier PC 2K. Yeah, and so one person, you know, Robert's saying he had to change his laptop to help run everything. So in general, laptops are gonna like obviously suck versus desktops and just their capabilities and everything else. The other thing I would say is I only like in Camtasia, and I don't know about even OBS for sure. You can specify the exact sections you want to record. So I was not recording extraneous display stuff. I was recording very specific, you know, the chart and the box. And I think, you know, just the key areas I wanted. Oops, I just messed up my chat. Yeah, Drew says he only records the first 30, 60 minutes. I recorded everything just because I did a lot of news trading. I also wanted, I mean, like I was a huge, like imbalance trader for like witchings and stuff. So obviously Friday was a triple witching or quad witching, January, March, April, May. What month is it? No, it wasn't anywho, it was whatever. It was a big OPEX last Friday and January, March, April, May. Yeah, it wasn't anywho. So yeah, it is a concern, but I think like one, if you do some of those best practices, it really shouldn't be. And then I would just test it. I'm trying to think how I tested it. I don't remember. I came up with some creative way to test that involved like having some type of time being displayed. I don't really remember, but yeah, I've considered it and I didn't find it to be an issue because I took like prudent steps, I guess is my long-winded answer. Yeah. Oh, so we've got Roberto. I'm just not going to read these questions too much because I'm losing my voice. Breaking news trades, building database of breaking news trades. Yeah, some will have multiple breaking news opportunities like PARA, Paramount, and scheduled events like Investors Days, analysts, correct? So how can a developing trader optimize the event-driven approach to identify these themes that might have multiple opportunities? Analysts and industry days, and be more specific about the filtering. So the unsatisfactory answer is, of course, experience over time. So M&A, of course, is an amazing area for headlines, earnings and their analyst calls and everything. There's also some conferences, like there's the ASCO conference, which is a cancer biotech conference. And over time, like just observing, like, so I would keep an Evernote database with all these different things and you start to realize where the best bang for your buck is and what's good, what's not. And even the filtering, like I'm eventually going to do a video on this, I think, for Magnum Opus, but a lot of that is from, this is where kind of the reverse engineering backtesting is super useful. You want to go back in time and be like, okay, what were the really big headlines? What are the criteria that catches all these headlines? Like, it's a trade-off. You want to catch as many headlines as possible that move the market while minimizing the noise of headlines that don't move the market. So it's always this push-pull. You can have a super wide aperture and say, I want to see every fucking headline imaginable, which is hard because then you need to read them all and you might miss the ones that matter. Or you can start to reduce that aperture, right? So you could be super, super specific and you can say, I'm going to miss all of this stuff on debt and Forex and rates and whatever, but I'm going to make sure I see every single M&A headline. So it's kind of like there's always going to be some level of trade-off. So I traded news, but I also traded a lot of other stuff. So like I wanted to see probably 95% of actionable headlines. I wanted to see every M&A headline. I wanted to see every really, really big one. But for some of the smaller ones, I was okay missing it because I did other stuff. So I'd say over time, it's like, what are the headlines you 100% want to see? You filter around those. Like you mentioned, M&A is a great area. Offerings are a great area. Those are things that I just never wanted to miss. But then there was stuff like, especially macro events, like especially come political time in the fall, there's going to be a zillion Biden and Trump headlines, or there's a zillion, like during the 2018 trade war with China, it was like, that became a super huge catalyst. So normally, while I want to overlook a lot of the macro stuff, at that time, it's like anything about this trade war I need to see because those headlines can be big. So it's kind of like this push pull that you just adjust and tweak over time, and that push pull never ends. I would imagine my filters that I used to use are probably like 80% is good, like because I just haven't been updating them. So it was something, and like I mean, not that I want to dox anyone, but Matt, just because you know have your name anyways, like would you agree that it's like this ever it's just you're just always kind of tweaking these things? Maybe he's not still on here.
Yeah, I think he's gone.
Oh, my bad. Well, anywho, I will just, in his absence, I will say he agrees with me. But no, I think you're just always kind of always tweaking that stuff. And because the reality is that the world is changing, right? Like the themes are changing. For my whole career, I don't give a shit about CPI. I don't want to see inflation headlines. I don't want the macro to dirty my feed. In 2022, I don't want to miss anything about Fed comments about inflation and whatever else. So it's always a work in progress. Yeah, is that good, Roberto? Beautiful. Ozzy. So Ozzy's asking a question about imbals. I don't really want to delve into imbalances too much just because trading imbalances and some of this stuff is like extremely, extremely technical and extremely, extremely nuanced. And it would probably take me like 4 hours to answer this. But the gist I would say is like, if everyone's looking at the same imbalance orders, why is there an edge in trading these? Is the edge in speed or knowing this or that? I would say if everyone's looking at the same chart, why is there edge in trading a chart? It's because your interpretation of the available data is different and more accurate than other people's, right? Like, I'm not saying my chart reading is right all the time. It's not predictive. It's still probabilistic game, yada, yada, yada. But the reason why I can read the same chart and have the same information that everyone else has and make money is because my interpretation of what that data is saying is more accurate. So with imbalances, like, yeah, everyone can see the same imbalances and everything else. it's using experience and your interpretation of the data from your experience to know like, okay, what of these imbalances are going to pair? Where are these imbalances going to close? And that is very much a skill set that is done over time, and through experience. And so like it's a mix of speed when the imbalances initially come out. It's knowing exactly what orders to use when. It's also knowing the technical details. Like, so again, one thing I did, and one thing that separated me from so many people out there, is I read all the literature. I went to NASDAQ, NYSE, Amex, which is owned by NYSE, I believe, and I read all the literature on these imbalances. So in my belief, I understood these auctions far better than not anyone else out there. Like, there's like quants that literally know all this, but better than most day traders. That's for sure. Definitely better than most day traders. So it was like I had an informational advantage and an understanding advantage. I had an experience advantage. I had all sorts of orders. I had speed. So that's like, again, everyone has the same information, but it's like, what do you bring to the table to beat the kind of market? Whew. Drew. Okay. CTNT on 5-20, caught in the wicks. I mean, okay, so for reference, run up Chinese kind of bullshit company. Okay. Did I get this chart right? What just happened? Maybe he means, wait, Drew, are you still on here?
Yeah, I'm here. Yep.
Okay. Do you mean like after hours in here?
No, well, yes, exactly. After hours. Yes.
Okay. Got caught in the wicks around $5. Wait, so you mean
Well, sorry, the turn. I'm sorry. I'm talking about the turn. Yes. So
like
I tried
down
to,
here?
exactly.
So you were, let me read this again. So you were longing it, essentially.
I was trying to wait to the capitulation, right? I see it came in at 2, but I got in a bit late, around closer to 5 when it see this gap up.
Oh, like here.
Yeah.
Got it.
The next candle actually, 4.99, whatever it was, 5.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I would say in general, these Chinese stocks kind of, wow, Jesus, look what it did after hours. So I would say some of these I'm really, really careful of. Like, some of these can be tricky because some of these Chinese stocks implode and just don't offer any bounce at all. And like, just the way this was volume capitulating and everything else. What's interesting is like, this didn't have like the mega volume death to it, which, and sometimes these do end up reclaiming. Like, man, there was some stock in May. Oh God, was it MNDR or something where I was going to
Yeah.
I was going to write it up, but then I ended up just not. Like, I would say with some of these Chinese ones, like, especially after ZJYL, my general like eagerness to be involved in these is like somewhat, I find the shorts to be somewhat tough. And the longs can be a little weird too, because some of these like mega bounce and some of them just straight up die. So like, I don't particularly love these so much anymore from either direction. So I probably wouldn't have traded this so much. Because I do think, like, especially when the stock was at $3, like buying this around here, like, it's not surprising to me that does kind of chop around a bit. And you know, certainly there's no way on earth I would have ever captured this price action. Like, that's there's just no way I ever would have still been long. But overall, this wasn't the gist of it is I wouldn't have probably traded, especially there, because it's kind of too far up into this move overall. So right, just because I don't do it doesn't mean other people shouldn't. Just for me, it's not like, it's not in my wheelhouse enough that I'd feel good
Yeah,
either
it's not
way.
a clean setup. Yeah, it's not an
Yeah.
I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So GME 520, 1110, break and reclaim. GME 520, break and reclaim. Oops. GME, I already forgot, 1120 or 1110? GME. 11. Oh, so you mean this break?
Yeah,
Got it,
yes.
got it.
Yeah.
So let me figure out. So this was on, 1 second. Let me just see the context of this. This was 520. So one quick thing is like my short bias on this day, like the daily is important, right? In this specific one, my short bias is like it's pretty much gone at this point, just because like we were up at 60 plus, we just absolutely melt. We're all the way back to the moving average. This company's raised cash. We were kind of like consolidating at like 16-ish, 15-ish anyways. So like the amount of meat left on the bone and us being so close to this moving average and kind of sitting on it, like I generally am not going to be so confident or sizing a short too much, especially given that like this broke prior day highs in this 5-20. So those nuances alone on some of this stuff, like so often I end up just avoiding a lot of stuff just by like being super picky with the nuances. Like one other thing that would always happen is like so many people would be like, oh my God, like, did you trade XYZ? Like, I'm sure you got hurt in this. And like a lot of the times people would assume I traded stuff, but it's like, I'm really very selective with where I get involved. So the daily would make me have some pause to be doing this short. One, close to the moving average. Two, we broke prior day highs. This intraday, of course, is like somewhat appealing. This is a nice little level. And so like, I don't really mind shorting this and just getting stopped out. Like that's fine. So how would I trade it? So if it's a really good setup, which, this again, for me, just wouldn't necessarily qualify. If it's a really good setup, I don't mind just reshorting once, these bars are super weak. Like I don't mind just reshorting and hitting that. I know it's tempting to be like, oh my God, it ended up, working and making a leg, but like stuff can make a leg, but if it's not clean, like that doesn't help me so much. So I would have avoided both of these, but like if the setup's good enough, I do want to reshort. And so like,
So on Gmail as an example, is that something where you just pull it off your watch list? You're saying, hey, this thing's made its run. I'm kind of let it consolidate for a few weeks and come back to it, or
I wouldn't
Yeah.
say it's like off my watch list per se, because I'm definitely looking at it every single day and keeping a super close eye. Like when GME is so opportunistic, like I don't have any kids, but I'm watching this closer than I would watch my kid because I don't want it to move anywhere without me. Whereas like, with a kid, you're like, go
Right.
get hit by a bus. It's fine. No, I'm just kidding. But no, so I'm always watching it. It's never, it's still to this day on my watch list right now. And I'm still looking what it's doing every single day just to make sure nothing sets up too interesting. But yeah, it's certainly my interest on this specific day was like probably a 2 out of 10, 3 out of 10, but I'm definitely still watching it. To make the point that I was going to make, this day, the 5-14. So for context, this is the super euphoric big capitulation day. 14, mega gap up. So this setup here, these lows, this was a nice setup where we started to kind of compress, like kind of a lower high, lower high, lower high. We start to sit on this. And so this, I didn't expect to be clean because the consolidation wasn't so great. So this ended up breaking and reclaimed, but because I like this daily so much, and this is such A+ on the daily, one, I was anticipating this to be a little choppy because like, this was still just up here. It wasn't so tight all the way down on this level. Okay, I'm gonna risk it for the biscuit, guys. Bear with me here. This is dangerous. I might never get back out of this. Let's see, did I learn? Okay. This consolidation all in here was a little bit high off of this support line, off those lows. I wish all of this was, you know, the 20 cents lower. If I could shift all this down, then I would have really liked this. So I wasn't that shocked that this wasn't so super clean, but because this daily is so damn good, like when this then kind of shakes out and rolls over, because everything on this is so good, I definitely want to go for this again. Like the benefit of the doubt is I want to be involved in this at lows because the daily is so good. If we take this NVIDIA on the 20th, oh God, I'm all sorts of fucked again. This is like, I wish there was AI that could just make this like easier, you know, but it's like AI is doing dumb stuff instead. This NVIDIA on Thursday, this is interesting enough where it's like when this breaks to lows, I want to be involved at least in some way. Even though we got back above, when this rolls to lows later, because the daily's so good, I want to be involved. If this was not so good of a daily, it's like whatever, you know. So that's a long-winded way of saying, yeah,
Daily
just-
setup gives you more conviction for the intraday, is what you're saying.
exactly, and that's when I'm
Okay.
willing to give it more benefits
Yeah,
of the
okay.
doubt.
Yeah, okay, understood.
6-3 GME.
And, you know, one of the issues with GME was just not being able to find borrow either on some of those days.
Yep, that's always a pain in the ass. I mean, I think most places should have had GME for what it's worth. I mean, definitely, you know,
IB
not
did. There were days on IB I couldn't get any.
are you familiar with like pre-borrow and stuff?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
yeah, got it.
Yeah.
I mean, depending on, I don't know your situation and everything else, but like it's worth considering potentially like a center point. Like, yes, you know, I am friends with some of those, like the founders and the guys there. No, I don't get like any affiliation, but stuff like that, they're always generally going to have borrow on, and that stuff can make a difference sometimes. Or again, yeah, like you can just use options, but that's not quite as ideal always either. So that's worth thinking about. Did you short calls on 6-3? Trying to think. This was, yeah, so this was when he showed his whole position and it was huge. Did I short calls here? Yeah, not a ton, I don't think, but in general, every pop I was shorting calls, especially after this first one, because once this died, like my view was like, we're not getting above these highs again. If we did get above these highs, I would have needed to kind of reconsider my game plan and stuff. But yeah, in general, I shorted calls on this pop and sold them. Then even here, I shorted calls. And so one thing that was super interesting is like the volatility on this was just so insanely high that pretty much like even through here, I was selling calls, and here I just let them expire. We pop, I sell calls, you know, then they get beat to shit. And at this point, and you know, whatever, you can close a lot out or whatever. So like, I'd be kind of playing the ranges where a ball would explode, I'd sell a chunk, then we'd come back down. And so this was kind of like the webcast news. The webcast was total shit. Once I realized like, oh my God, this guy is an idiot and there's no actual game plan to this. That like, especially that's when I got pretty aggressive. Now the volatility's contracted a pretty huge amount. So I still have a little bit of calls, but I'm nearly flat. The other thing that's really amazing to me is the calls on this AMC. These AMC calls stayed so expensive. They're not anymore. Like I'd say last week, they finally, once Roaring Kitty did his dumb, shitty live stream, which sucked, like that's when the
It's pretty
volatility.
funny. Did you think it was funny?
Did I think it was funny?
It was funny, right? It was just kind of ridiculous.
I mean, I guess it was funny. Like, I mean, like the dude, like, man, I mean, I guess it's also kind of astounding to me just at the same time, like how dumb he is. Like, he's not an
Yeah.
idiot, but that was the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Like,
Yeah. That he
That
trusts the
just
CEO
proves, like,
management.
just-
Right.
yeah, like
the
how
news
much
was
he
crazy.
actually doesn't care. And the thing is,
Yeah.
like, I truly believe that he believes his whole story about the undervalued crap and all this stuff and yada, yada, yada. But like, dude, like, that's like, I actually think he's fundamentally wrong, but like got the populist movement and whatever, and he took advantage of it. Okay, great. But like, dude, to show up 30 minutes late, then have totally no plan and like to just incinerate, like, I get that he doesn't care about money at this point, but like to just totally incinerate hundreds of millions of dollars kind of seems like, I don't know, he's operating from a mindset that I can't really, it's so foreign to my perspective that like, I guess it's funny, but it was also just like, holy shit, like everybody that believed in this guy must have seen that live stream and been like, holy shit, like it's almost like you follow this cult leader that you think is like this total genius. Then like he does this epic anticipated live stream and you realize like, oh my God, this guy is just like high on crystal meth or something.
Right,
And
exactly.
So
Yeah,
it was just
exactly.
like anybody that thought this guy's making like a rational, coherent argument or had some master plan up his sleeve, it's like, wow, that's out the window. And I think, I mean, the guy is gonna like, I mean, GME's raised enough money that this isn't going back to 10, but man, like this guy could have, I don't know, it boggles my mind, but I mean, that's how he got here to begin with. I guess it was somewhat funny, but it was also just like, oh my God, like there's probably tens of thousands of people just following a total moron and like believing in his conspiracy theories and everything else. So I don't know, I guess.
Yeah, it feels like the trade's over, right? Once I saw that he had no plan, I feel like this is over.
Yeah. Then I'm like, this stock's done. And I mean,
Yeah.
anything can always happen. Like the volatility is cheap enough not now that I don't care to keep on selling calls. Like I'm nearly flat. Like I pretty much have just a little AMC and a little GameStop. But man, like the vol on those things was just amazing.
Yeah,
And again,
400
I
plus.
don't
It's the highest I've ever
want to.
seen.
And this is so important with the pendulum. I'm like, I don't want to be holding size when we're back here, right? I want to short the extremes, cover into this, get flat on these, short some, cover into it, short some. Then like, once it was done, I just held and now I'm not rewriting. The biggest trap you can get in with selling options is you can get suckered into selling them when it's no longer super juicy. Like in general, I want to sell options when the tails are occurring, when the blowout's happening. Yeah. Wait, let me see. I think there was one more question here. MU, where would you short? So some of this I kind of discussed, and I'm going to discuss more. To trade this day, when I'm going to San Francisco. So let me say, I don't think MU was necessarily the best. Oops. I think MU was good. I mean, it's kind of tough. They all had their pros and cons. I think overall, probably the juiciest is NVIDIA, just because big picture, there's so much meat on this bone. Like, I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm more bearish than I should be, but I wouldn't be shocked if this goes back in some way to here. I don't know if I'll hold. For all I know, I could be, stopped out tomorrow. Like NVIDIA wasn't so great, like as far as the near term, but like really big picture, like NVIDIA's was pretty damn insane. The other thing that I mean, this doesn't really do it justice, but like, let me go to. Right. Essentially, we go from like 30 to 40 on that earnings announcement, and we just coast around and go flat. We then go 50 to 95 over a couple months. Then we go flat, pull back a little and like consolidate less. Now we go just like 95 to like 140 in a way faster, sharper amount of time on the same catalyst. Like this is a pretty damn protracted leg with like, it's the third leg with less and less consolidation. So I wouldn't be shocked. And again, I could be, maybe I'm just wrong. Like we'll just see what happens. But I do think this could have a lot of room, and maybe they all just die for a while. I don't really know. But I mean, even the Avigo was kind of, to go 1400 to 1900 pretty much. That's, Yeah, I don't know. They all had their pros and cons. I don't feel so strongly, but they all were okay. San Fran, no current plans, but potentially at some point. Matt, who had left, I'd like to hear your thoughts on NVIDIA trading. Yeah, I mean, we kind of touched a fair amount of that. I guess my to end some of this stuff, it's like, you know, in summary, like, you know, MU, I think once that pulls back so much, you kind of got to take that. Like when NVIDIA is still up kind of in the stratosphere and this is all the way down there, like that's probably going to be an okay cover. The AVGO, I'm kind of just trailing. I do think these pull back more. I think NVIDIA can pull quite a bit more. But I mean, again, to talk on some of the cons, like the volume capitulation being lacking is somewhat concerning. But I also wonder, would any of this move really occurred if it wasn't for some of this like index rebound, like the ARM edition? Like I do kind of think we just ended up in this crazy feedback loop where it's like one stock reports good earnings, which then propels all the other stocks. And then Avago or Broadcom, whatever, does good earnings. And then it's like, I just felt like all this was just like every feedback loop. And then, you know, Elon Musk does his XAI and it's like, oh my God, everything's going up again. It's just like, dude, like we get it. Like this AI is big. And I just feel like it got to the point where it's like, oh my God, NVIDIA rebound, and oh my God, ARM is being added to the index. And it's just like, we get it. These are the hot stocks, but it's like, you can't have just good news and good hype and growth forever. And when you're making moves like this, eventually it's just too much too fast. But again, like, you know, at this point, everything I'm in, I have a stop. I'm not going to be stubborn. But when it's made 3 legs like this, and again, I cover these dailies in like a 45-minute video that I'll send out at some point. Yeah, I don't know. I kind of think this stuff could die for a while more. So we'll see. But again, I'm open-minded. Like I have views, but it's like obviously the chart's gonna just do whatever, and I'm wrong quite a bit. NVIDIA, as far as the options was, you know, interesting. I mean, but I would argue as far as selling premium, I do actually think selling premium in NVIDIA wasn't so great, but selling premium in AVGO was exceptionally interesting. Let me think. So I think that was the bulk of the questions. I think I got them all. Yeah, what can I touch on from here? I might just do like another 10, 15 minutes. My voice is pretty toast. But yeah, what can I re-go over or dive into more or anything else?
Another one regarding on breaking news, Lance, if I may.
Yeah.
You had at the start of the meeting, Sierra Alpha Mike, the chart. This one had the takeover headline last day of May.
Yep.
You can see that strong candle. I saw the headline, I understand it. Now, despite of actually having a specific playbook, when these stocks with M&A headlines get halted, you know what happen if the price resumes above the halted price, what happen if the same price, blah blah blah. But one thing stopped me from taking this trade, and it was liquidity. This thing on a normal day, maybe you have 500,000 or on average volume on or even less. And you can see that even with this headline, it wasn't moving that monstrosity on volume. Then you posted things related to this opportunity, and I was like, damn, did I miss something in this one? So I want to know your feedback on this one and liquidity on this kind of headlines.
Yeah, I mean, so like the stock, I would argue, is spready. But like given the high price, like obviously you're not going to be trading the same size as this as like you know, Nvidia's 1/3 the price and infinitely more liquid. So obviously you're not going to, and just this is super volatile on this headline. So like that being said, this is doing, you know, like 60,000 shares a bar, seven, or actually, sorry, this did 80,000 in this bar, 70,000 there. An appropriate size for many traders in this is going to just be the potentially hundreds of shares or like low thousands. And so, I mean, even 1,000 shares in this is a fair amount because this is moving quite a bit. So like, yes, the liquidity isn't so great, and this is volatile, but then I would say that just needs to affect your share sizing. And generally in stuff like this, because you know, there's no way you can risk 5 cents in this. There's no way you can risk 50 cents in this. Like the spread alone generally in this was probably like a point. So that does influence the expected value when you can't as seamlessly get in and out. So that's really just going to affect my sizing. That being said, like I would argue there were spots in this that still had positive expected value, even adjusted for the spread. So that's where I'll just be much smaller size. And so like there's some stuff that can have amazing expected value, but it's a liquid. And that just means being really small. And so I'm trying to think of like some examples where it's like, I mean, so even take AVGO, right? AVGO is a high price stock. We're talking 1,800 bucks. You know, the spread on this is generally at least a point, I would say, couple points. And, you know, in the volume, like it's doing a lot, but per bar, nothing that crazy. And like, what I would say is like, you know, if you short whatever this was 1785 and if you're giving a big out, like there's times where even like for many traders the right size on this could be 10 shares or it could be 20 shares, in which if you're trading size like that, you're not going to have any liquidity problems. But yes, you need to factor in the spread and everything else into the math. And that just means generally sizing down. And then the other thing that a lot of people really fail to do is when something's super hyper liquid, you can really afford to be very, very aggressive and do the opposite. So let's take this Apple. I don't think so. 611. So keep in mind the $200 level we were talking about. Oops, 611. So this didn't have any like super amazing setup whatsoever, but let's say this made this move and we had a super clean consolidation where this didn't do the fake out. Like Apple's a very liquid stock, you know, on some of these bars, we're doing hundreds of thousands, if not like millions per share. Or sorry, per bar. So like when it's super liquid, like again, you know, this broke a little bit early. I would have liked to just see super clean across to this moving average actually, which is when it ended up going. But in situations like that, when it's very liquid, there's going to be setups where you can risk even just like 5-10 cents and potentially get many points on this. So yes, we want to size down when things are illiquid and spreads are wide, but then we also want to, all things being held equal, size up when things are very liquid because the cost to get in and out, it gives us so much more skew. Good. Drew says, great AMA. You're very welcome. Any final questions? Maybe we'll do one more. Anything else left to ask? Well, maybe we covered it all.
I have the last one.
And does anyone else want to take it? Otherwise, it's going to default to Roberto. Go on once, go on twice, 3 times sold. Let's hear it. You're welcome, Jeremy, by the way. Go ahead.
Early prints on breaking news.
Yep.
I've been working on that, but my first goal with this trading approach is not to be the first, but to be in the right stock with the right headline that allows me to ride the momentum and, you know, those headlines and stocks that respect the 2-minute high or low system.
Mhm.
So I have a comprehensive database of that. And okay, I'm confident enough of knowing what kind of headlines and what kind of stocks and their intraday fundamentals. Now, if I if I wanted to move on and go even more serious about this kind of trading, the next step is okay, how can get early in the movement. I am thinking about technology, of course. I have to analyze the microstructure of what are the early signs of okay, something is going on, even before the headline shows up on News Edge or trading news, etc. What if it's possible? What advice, what guidance could you give me to go further and go in the right path in this trading approach?
Yeah, so I'd say, right, if I were to break this down, like first we can start off just simply observing news headlines, which tend to go, how do they tend to move? We then can tackle them and say, what's the slowest way? Maybe I'm not going to touch the initial headline at all. Maybe I'm going to find the headlines that make a leg, consolidate really nice, then do the old bouncy ball pattern and have like a tight breakout or a breakdown. So maybe I'm not even going to touch anywhere near the initial part, and I'm going to touch it for the second leg. That's a very slow, low risk kind of way to build up a playbook. Then what you described, whereas you've studied these headlines and you know when to join during the move, that's a somewhat faster way to do it. Then of course the most extreme is to catch the first prints. And so I'd say like generally for most people new to anything, you want to find what's the slowest, easiest way, then start to build that skill set, study, database, everything like you're saying and doing. And so then it's going to be again, being aware, like still developing what are the headlines that move and why, how can I be as fast as possible? How can I, so like, let's break down the process. First of all, you want the headline as fast as possible. You need to make sure you're seeing it. Two, you need to process it as fast as possible. How can you read faster? How can you interpret faster? A lot of this is just experience. Like I don't have any magic answer for any of that. Then three, how can you simplify all the keystrokes and execution to do that? That's where stuff like hotkeys, that's like stuff, like optimized order routing, optimized internet. If you're on dial-up, it's not going to happen. And then like you want to study and break down all these components and see how can I be as fast as possible in each. And then at some point you want to just try it with one share and you want to train that skill and get reps and reps and reps. Okay, I'm going to buy this headline on one share. If I buy the top and I lose a point on one share, I'm just not going to care. That's the cost of tuition. And you build that rep on one share, one share, one share. And while you're doing that, you refine all those subcategories. And you document and you document and you document. And a lot of it takes reps, a lot of it takes expertise. And then you're going to start to find like, okay, what headlines are slower than others? There's some headlines that are very slow and sneaky, and there's some like M&A that are going to be super fast. So it's like, okay, let me specialize first in slow and sneaky. Slow and sneaky headline is random nobody that nobody knows about tweets something important and no one's following it, and it's going to take 10 minutes for the tweet to circulate and whatever. So you want to find like what's the slowest, easiest places, and how do I build up the different components of this strategy. And then of course experience and reps. Like at the end of the day, for a lot of this stuff, like it's just the reality that you can I can talk, but everyone needs to do the work and make things their own. And so maybe making it your own for you might mean, you want to know what's interesting too. In general, like the US market is the most efficient market. In the world, a lot of markets, especially for stuff like news, get priced in much slower. And so I know some international traders that do breaking news in foreign markets. They're not as liquid, and there's not as many headlines and everything else, but there's way less competition. you know, that alone is like different advantages that different people do. You know, there's people that specialize and say, hey, I don't mind waking up early. I'm going to do early pre-market trading. There's people that say like, oh my God, with this overnight trading that's so popular, yes, it's only in large stocks, but like, look, I'm a night owl anyways. I'm going to try and, you know, for like the Roaring Kitty tweets, especially the first couple, and they moved so slow because not everyone was following Super Stonk and him on Twitter still and everything else. And I mean, even take you know, there are headlines that happen overnight when like if you were like there's US traders out there in New Zealand, Australia, Germany, Europe, Italy. I mean, there's a lot of guys in Spain from that meetup trading US markets, right? And so if they're up at different hours, you know, there's ways to play to your strengths and figure out the best way to get reps, I guess, is what I'm saying.
That's gold. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Well, everyone from across the world, thank you guys for attending. My voice is pretty much toast, so I am going to kind of keep this somewhat shorter. But no, a lot of amazing questions. I mean, I think this was probably the most questions we've ever received ahead of time on anything. I will get this recording up ASAP. I am done with the May top ops. That just needs to be produced. I will get the copy of that other video on these daily charts that I'm going to post. We will have the Wired video going live soon. We will also have the trailer going live. So a lot of good stuff. Appreciate the patience because generally I have a lot of stuff I'm working on at once. And truth be told, the Patreon does take kind of the back seat so I can get the course going. But yeah, appreciate all the questions and I really enjoy doing these. So thank you all for your time and all the good questions.
Thanks, Lance.
Thank you, Lance.
Thank you.